Get out, you useless daughter-in-law.
The day after the funeral of my father-in-law, whom I had cared for over 25 years. My husband was smirking beside my mother-in-law.
We're getting a divorce. And there will be no division of property.
They hurled cruel words at me, looking down on me. Anger welled up from the depths of my stomach, and I clenched my fists tightly. How could they say such things to me after all I've done for them? They'll regret it. I decided to divorce and leave as they told me to. My mother-in-law and husband, who were laughing triumphantly, did not realize an important fact at that moment. I grew up in a complicated environment and was completely alone in my 20s, with no family. Despite my introverted nature, I longed for a family and hoped to get married someday. I was working as a nurse in a hospital when one day, a woman who came to the outpatient clinic suddenly asked me,
Would you like to meet my son?
At first, I was bewildered, but I mustered up the courage to go on the arranged meeting. This is how I met Jose, who would become my husband, 3 years my senior. He was an ordinary office worker who approached me with affection. His mother, Aurora, also strongly encouraged our marriage, and we quickly registered our marriage. I was happy to finally have the family I had dreamed of for so long and believed I could build a happy home with the kind Aurora and Jose. However, on the day we started living together after the wedding, Aurora and Jose called me. When I went to the room, there was a man I had never met lying in bed.
From now on, you will take care of my father.
What? Jose had told me he lived with his mother, Aurora, so I was surprised. I had no idea his father was there.
My father had a stroke a year ago and became disabled.
Jose explained with a troublesome look on his face to my bewildered self.
Finally free from caregiving. Take care of him, Jade. And since you'll be a housewife, you'll do all the housework too.
Aurora said this and left the room with Jose. I was still confused, but I greeted my father-in-law, David. He was paralyzed on one side of his body and had difficulty speaking, but his mind seemed clear, and he looked at me with an apologetic expression. From then on, I gradually became a full-time housewife and took care of David. However, taking perfect care of one person proved to be quite challenging. I managed for a few months, but eventually, I reached my limit. Jose, Aurora. Could we hire a helper for David's care? Bathing him is very difficult, and I can't manage it alone. When I hesitantly asked, both Jose and Aurora frowned.
What are you talking about? That would be a waste of money.
That's right. You're a nurse, aren't you? You can handle it. Don't be so dependent.
The kindness Jose and Aurora showed before the marriage had vanished, and they began treating me coldly. Aurora stayed home all day, but she only watched TV or took naps and never helped with the caregiving. Moreover, she constantly complained about my housework.
Jade, what's with this soup? It's too bland and unsatisfying.
I'm sorry. It's also for David's diet, so it has to be mild.
Then make a separate batch for us. Don't cut corners.
Already exhausted from caregiving, Aurora kept making unreasonable demands and pushing troublesome tasks onto me. If I tried to argue, She would say things like, "Was it a mistake to let you marry Jose?" and nag me for hours, so I had no choice but to comply. As for Jose, he was often away from home due to overtime or business trips, and even when he was home, he wouldn't talk to me. Jose, about Aurora.
Oh, shut up. Let me relax when I'm at home.
With this attitude, I felt increasingly isolated despite being married. This life continued for several years, and I began to question the meaning of staying with them when they treated me so coldly. I gradually realized that I wasn't married out of love, but was brought in as a convenient caregiver. Despite this life, David always thanked me awkwardly and apologetically whenever I took care of him. His efforts to be considerate and not burden me were painfully clear. Talking with David made me feel calm and somewhat rewarded. Before I knew it, 20 years had passed since our marriage. With the demanding caregiving and Jose's indifference, we had no children. However, by then, I was determined to take care of the kind David until the end, and I continued my married life. One day, I took David for a walk in his wheelchair. However, I realized I had forgotten something and returned home, only to overhear Aurora and Jose talking, unaware of our presence.
I wonder how long Dad plans to live. I wish he'd just hurry up and go to the other side.
His parents were landowners, so we're supposed to get a hefty inheritance. Honestly, he's so stubborn despite his condition.
I was shocked and tried to prevent David from hearing, but he stopped me.
Hey, Mom. Let's sell Dad's foreign car. It'll fetch a good price.
Yeah, we might as well. Once we get the money, let's go on a trip. Just the two of us, Jose.
I knew how much David cherished his prized car and wanted to protest, but David told me to
pretend we didn't hear it.
In the end, Jose and Aurora sold David's car and went on a trip by themselves. 5 years later, David, who had always been kind, caught a cold that turned into pneumonia, and he passed away. David, please rest in peace. I shed tears, but Aurora and Jose looked indifferent, almost relieved.
Finally, it's all sorted out. Jade, make sure everything goes smoothly.
Aurora and Jose, as if it were natural, left all the funeral arrangements to me. I took care of David until the very end, and as I prepared for the funeral, I thought of him. 2 days later, after seeing David off and taking a moment in front of his portrait, Aurora and Jose approached me together. Aurora pointed at me with a triumphant look.
Get out, you useless daughter-in-law!
What?
We don't need you for caregiving anymore, so there's no reason for you to stay here. Pack your things and leave.
I looked to Jose for help, but he just smirked.
We're getting a divorce. And there will be no division of property.
How could you? We've been married for 25 years, and now you're just discarding me. They glared at me with disdain.
We only took you in as a caregiver. You are convenient because you were a nurse. You have no other value.
We took in an ugly, family-less woman like you and supported you. You should be grateful.
Aurora and Jose mocked me and thrust the divorce papers at me. At that moment, I felt intense anger, but I quickly calmed down. How could they do this to me after 25 years of dedication? They'll regret it. Feigning composure, I said, I understand, and signed the divorce papers.
Glad you made it quick.
Now, go live miserably.
I packed my things and left the house, but they didn't even look at me, happily discussing how to spend the inheritance. A week later, I received a call from Jose on my cell phone. At first, I ignored it, but he kept calling persistently, so I reluctantly answered.
Hey, I have something important to discuss. We need to meet.
I didn't respond and simply told him where to come, then hung up. 2 hours later, Aurora and Jose arrived, their eyes wide with shock.
Hey, why are you living in a place like this?
Their surprise was understandable. My residence was a luxurious apartment in one of the most expensive high-rise buildings in the area. More importantly, didn't you come here to discuss something? They were momentarily overwhelmed by the luxurious interior and the view, but soon regained their composure and glared at me.
When we checked Dad's inheritance, there was only $1,000 in cash.
That's impossible. Do you know anything about this?
I took a deep breath and smiled. Yes. David gave me all his assets as a lifetime gift.
What?
This high-rise apartment was also bought with the money David recommended I use. Aurora and Jose were stunned, almost collapsing in shock.
What do you mean, a lifetime gift?
I then explained that David had been giving me a substantial amount of money every month for caregiving for the past 25 years. Of course, I refused at first, but David insisted.
Please accept it. Don't tell my wife or son about this.
And he continued to give it to me. Furthermore, for years before he passed away, David arranged with a lawyer to transfer all his real estate to my name and gave me all his assets.
Even if it means paying a large amount of tax, I want to give it to Jade, who has taken care of me while I'm still alive.
David had said. Aurora and Jose looked like their souls had left their bodies, but soon veins bulged on their temples as they grew angry.
I can't accept this. You can't just hog the inheritance all to yourself.
That's right. We'll sue you. That way, we can get our share back.
Despite their outbursts, I remained calm. Indeed, you do have the right to claim for the infringement of your reserved portion, and if you go to court, you might be able to recover some of the assets.
I knew it. This is obviously wrong. We'll definitely take it back, so be prepared.
However, only those who are qualified to inherit can make such claims. Aurora shouted.
We are the heirs.
But I read out the letter David had left. In it, he wrote that 5 years ago, he heard Aurora and Jose saying, "I wish you'd hurry up and die," which led him to decide to give me his assets while he was still alive. Aurora and Jose exchanged uneasy glances.
But we are his wife and son. We have the right to inherit.
The letter also states this: I will take steps to disinherit my wife, Aurora, and my son, Jose. Jose and Aurora tilted their heads in confusion. Disinherit? Disinheritance is a procedure that the decedent, in this case, David, can take if he does not want his assets to be inherited by certain individuals. I explained that if the family court approves it, even a wife or son cannot receive the inheritance. I heard from David that you two were verbally abusing him regularly when I wasn't around. You also sold his car without permission and used the money for a trip.
No, that was.
For these reasons, David took steps to disinherit you while he was alive, and it was approved. Therefore, you are not eligible to receive any inheritance. Aurora and Jose panicked and shouted.
That's a lie.
But I handed them the business card of the lawyer David had hired, saying, "Please ask the lawyer for details." When they called the lawyer, they found out that they really couldn't receive the inheritance, and suddenly changed their tune.
We're family, aren't we? Let's go back to how things were.
Say, Jade, I apologize for everything. Will you take me back? Let's remarry right away.
But I smiled sweetly at Jose. "Oh, and what about this person if I get back with you?" When I gently placed a brown envelope on the table, Jose turned pale as he suspiciously checked its contents. It was only natural, as the envelope contained conclusive evidence of Jose's infidelity.
Why do you have this?
Your partner is a junior colleague at your company, right? You were planning to kick me out and remarry after getting the inheritance once David passed away, weren't you? At David's suggestion, I had hired a private investigator to look into Jose before David passed away. As a result, evidence of his long-term infidelity was found. I was planning to confront you about this after David passed away, but you divorced me first. However, I have the right to claim alimony. You will pay me in full. Jose, who looked like he was about to foam at the mouth, and Aurora, who had turned completely pale.
Wait a minute, alimony is impossible. We were counting on the inheritance, so we have almost no savings.
You took our property and now you want to extort more money from us? Are you a devil?
At that moment, I shouted at the top of my voice. Who's the devil here? I will never forgive you. You will pay for how you treated David. Now get out of here and never show your faces again. I forcibly threw the two of them out of the room as they panicked. After that, since the house Jose and Aurora lived in was also in my name, I made them leave. They ended up moving into a dilapidated apartment that looked like it could collapse at any moment. I demanded $50,000 in alimony from Jose and his mistress, and they paid in full. Jose was yelled at by his mistress for being asked to pay alimony, causing a huge scene at his company, and he was disciplined. He broke up with the woman and is now a sidelined employee, looked down upon by everyone. Aurora and Jose had no savings, and it turned out Aurora even had debts, making their lives quite difficult. It's said that arguments can be heard from their apartment every night, but I feel no sympathy for them. Meanwhile, I am living in a luxury high-rise apartment and have started working part-time as a nurse again. Thanks to David, I won't have to worry about my livelihood from now on, but I plan to use the money wisely. I am determined to live the rest of my life positively, for myself.
How did you like this story? Please subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.